assurance audit, looking at continuous improvement processes we can put in place, including continuous improvement reporting. What worked, what didn't, and what steps we're going to take, and what's the timeline to take those steps. Those are all things that we need to put in place. Absolutely. Yes.
Good evening, everyone. Eldridge Hawkins. Well, first, thanks for all the questions or answers. Found it very informative. Slightly hot button topic. How do you feel about, how should I phrase it, merit-based pay or incentive-based pay for teachers and superintendents, tying their increases in some way, shape, or form to the progress of the school or the progress of the students?
Well, you know, kids are given tests and they're graded and they're advanced, promoted, etc. on the basis of their grades. Performance reviews, performance-related bonuses, performance-related rewards and penalties have also become a standard part of quality assurance in corporate America. I think as to whether or not the current teacher evaluation system is going to be effective, it's all brand new to folks and they're still trying to figure out how to fully execute it on the Marzano standards and all that stuff. So I think that there's going to be a period of test, learn, adapt, grow. And I think that the idea of tying performance to rewards or penalties, I think that that's a fundamental principle in the success of corporate America and the success of any institution. Whether or not we have the right performance measures in place, we will once again test, learn, and then adapt and then grow. That's what we have to do to find that out. Also, I want to see greater administrative accountability. There is an administrative portion of that evaluation. I'm not sure that it's deep enough though. I would like to see for administrators, because right now what happens is your math supervisor, your language arts, English language arts supervisor, they lead the development of a curriculum, they get some teacher feedback, and then they give it to the teachers and they meet with them weekly, okay, you got to execute this. Well, you know what, actually I'd like to find out from teachers how they feel about that anonymously so they don't feel subject to issues. I would like to do teacher surveys and get critical feedback, as well as parent surveys and get critical feedback in order to determine what are the real issues, how can we do better, and are the things that were brought up or proposed, because I'm aware of some right now, that were squashed and teachers were afraid to bring it up again. So that's another standpoint, and maybe even do for the administrators a 360-degree eval, where as part of their eval, they get feedback from the people who report to them. That would be interesting.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Question. You alluded to the fact that a significant portion of the budget is tied in the teachers' contracts and pension. I mean, doesn't that basically tie our hands with the amount of money and taxes we have to pay? I mean, it sounds like you guys don't really have much influence over that.
Well, actually, there's a lot of influence over that. One of the things that's happening with this last contract is that teachers have to contribute more towards their own health care and pensions. So greater teacher contributions took some of the weight off of our system and put greater onus and responsibility on the teachers. And that's a pretty big change. But that's also a change that you see happening across the country. The pension battles and the battles with unions, that's something that's happening across the country. So it's not entirely, our hands are not entirely tied, but we need to ask ourselves, what is fair? How do we reward the people who are helping to shape our children's intellectual lives on a daily basis? And how, what is the appropriate way to support them? And what's competitive with other school districts? Because guess what? If we're too stringent, guess where the best teachers will go? Elsewhere. So our hands are not completely tied, but I think it's a balancing act. And I think that every time a new contract comes out, that's an opportunity for the board, for the superintendent, the assistant superintendent, to scrutinize, to get critical feedback, and to scrutinize what elements do we need adjusted, and how will that impact our overall budget. I think it's an ongoing evaluation process, and it happens with every cycle.
Is there something at the top of your mind right now that you would change in the next contract?
No, I'd have to see more. I'd have to have more data information about how this one is going to play out. Once again, we already know that we put a greater burden, responsibility on the teachers in terms of paying for their own benefits. So that was already a step, saying, hey, we're not going to pay for all this. You have to pay for some of this. That was a big change. So I'd like to see how this plays out, and to be able to have an ongoing evaluation process.
Excuse me. This
We have
big
5 more
change-
minutes left, so. About 5 more minutes, so you can, please.
Yeah. This big change is not really very big. It's a 1.5%, if I'm correct, and didn't came from us. This is an example where the local administration or local powers didn't work very well. It came from the top. It was a decision that came from the top, from the governor, I believe, to ask them to contribute something a little bit. It's not a big amount, it's really 1.5%. And also from the top came the request or the order for the superintendent not to be paid more than the governor of the state. So we didn't do it. It was not something done by the Board of Education. It came thanks to God. I think that this should be remembered because it shows, and this is my opinion, that probably during the past years, whoever was in the Board of Education didn't control the cost very well, and they let those salaries and benefits going skyrocketing, and that has been the reason why we had enormous increases in property taxes.
Okay. It is true that it came from the governor. It is true, absolutely, that the board has responsibility in terms of scrutinizing and implementing those types of changes as well. It's also true that as we look at the superintendent's salary, we actually have an assistant superintendent who's going to end up earning more than any superintendent coming in. We also have a director of business administration who's earning an enormous amount. So I think, once again, we go back to accountability and best practices. When we look at the top school districts in the area, and if we want to achieve their level of performance, first of all, we have to be competitive in terms of getting the right talent. It's like, you know, if Apple wants to hire the right talent, they got to pay the right person, right? Or Microsoft. If we want to be the best, what's Livingston doing? And I haven't looked at this data. I'll be straight up with that. What's Livingston doing? What's South Orange doing? Who, by the way, has some computer learning even earlier in terms of software development. What are they doing in terms of teachers and administrators' salaries? And because we have to compete. When we're hiring somebody, we're not only controlling our own budget, but we're competing for the best talent. How do we compete for the best talent? And this is a fact, not just in the business world, it's a fact in academia. So what existing costs we look at? Do we put a cap on? I'm not going to name names or positions at this point, but do we put a cap on some of the current positions? And what do we need to do to compete to get the right person in as superintendent now? There's some speculation that there'll be challenges in getting the most experienced people in because we're not going to be able to pay them but a certain amount. So I think I want to see a study done in terms of competitive salaries. They may already have this information. They haven't shared it with the public yet, but I'd like to see a list when we look at the top 20 school districts in the state, and any school district ranking better than ours, what's their superintendent earning? What's their assistant superintendent earning? What's the head of business administration earning? And what are they actually doing? And then compare those side by side, saying, we're doing a talent search, because that's what this really is. It's about talent and talent development, pipeline development. What do we need to do to get the best talent and while at the same time controlling cost? And then when the next contract comes up, not just waiting for the governor or God, as you humorously put it, which is great, to come down with something. What can we do to scrutinize it and to make proper changes? And then holding town hall meetings. What you're saying tonight would have been great if the board held a town hall meeting and heard that from you or from other parents. Hey, what about this? What about this? What about this? I think that your input isn't just needed when it's election time. I think that your input is needed throughout the year as part of the town hall meeting process.
We have another question right here.
Sure.
Hi, good evening. My name is Charles Williams. My question is kind of twofold. One, are you in favor of merit pay for teachers? And two, are you in favor of the new Singapore math that is supposed to be possibly introduced into the high school?
Okay. For the first question, yes. In corporate America, performance is tied to rewards and benefits and to penalties. I think that from a quality assurance standpoint, teacher performance, we have to look at teacher performance and administrative performance and the performance of our school system. And tied to that performance, just as in corporate America, if you're going to be incentivized or motivated, not just by your vocation, but by your livelihood, there should be incentives tied to that as well as penalties when you don't perform as well. It's a double-edged sword, it's not a one-way ticket. And in terms of Singapore math, I've reviewed a lot of the Singapore math curriculum, and I was an advocate for Singapore math a few years ago. Singapore math, when we look at everyday math, one of when we look at the assets of everyday math and the related connected math to Singapore math, there are a couple things. Okay, what are the pros of everyday math? It does teach a level of conceptual thinking and application and problem solving. Yes. Does Singapore math also do that? I think so, yes. Okay, everyday math, but it also de-emphasizes some of the things that you and I felt were rudimentary growing up in terms of, hey, guess what? You do have to memorize certain things and certain processes and not just be given a problem and try to come back to the teacher with, this is what I think the equation should be. No, learn the equation first, the processes first, then go extrapolate. Plus, everyday math has some methods that I just don't agree with. Stem leaf graph. As I told Dr. Rando, nobody in their lives will ever again in any profession utilize a stem leaf graph. Teach them things that they actually get to use in life. Okay. Also lattice math. There's a reason that the ancient Chinese abandoned it, and that China, who puts out more engineers than anybody in the world, doesn't use it. Okay. Yeah. I have feelings about this, obviously. So yeah, there are issues. There are issues with that, but as parents, this all goes back to getting feedback from the parents as well. I was told by a certain administrator, oh, parents just don't really understand this, and that's why they have problems with it. And I said, I used to teach and tutor math, and the parents I'm talking to are business people who use math for their business, engineers, doctors. These are people who use math for all sorts of things. I think they do understand it. I think they just disagree with it. And Singapore math, there are a lot of studies that have shown its effectiveness. Now, here's where the battle will come in. Math scores have gone up. Some would attribute that to, hey, well, obviously everyday math worked. Have they gone up as much as we'd like them to? Probably not. But I think there we need to get parent feedback again. I'd like to know, for instance, how many parents are paying for tutors? I know a lot of them. How many parents are paying for tutors to help their child perform well?
That's right.
And the other thing that's supposed to happen, the execution of everyday math, is that the teachers are supposed to teach the everyday math methodology, and they're supposed to teach the, quote, traditional methodology side by side, and let the child choose which methodology is easiest for them to understand and apply. Now, the traditional methodologies are actually tend to be more shortcut related to the everyday math ones. But I have heard from some parents that their kids like the everyday math because it broke it down into increments. My son hated the lattice math, so I made sure his teacher reviewed with him the more traditional methods and the shortcuts, and he's fine with that. So we need some parent feedback. I want to do some parent research and say, hey, how many of you have actually, utilized a tutor, and how many of you took your kids out of the school system? I've heard stories about kids going to to private schools, and the teacher's like, what did you do here? What is this? And where'd you get this method? And had to reteach a more traditional method. So there are a couple of things. For here and now, until we can change something, parents need to make sure that the teachers are teaching everyday math alongside of the traditional methods so their child can choose. And we need the curriculum overview meetings so that parents and teachers can have that exchange and parents actually have input. We need to empower parents. Parents are the power. You aren't just stakeholders, you're shareholders. Whether you're a taxpayer who doesn't have kids, you're a shareholder. Whether if you're a parent with your children in the school, your kids are the clients for this organization, for this institution. You're a shareholder, not just a stakeholder. You need to get what you're investing in, and you need to get what your child needs to succeed.
On that note, can you actually just wrap up real quick why you're here? What's your thing then? Is for the sake of time, I'm just going to make sure.
Why I'm here? Very simply.
Give your platform real quick.
My platform really quickly. I want our children to have a world-class education, one that helps them to compete, to succeed, and to have the richness and depth of learning that will enrich their lives and help intellectually and socially and emotionally and last beyond the experience in our school system. I want our school system to go from a good school system to a premier school system that shines a beacon from West Orange that says to everybody, this is the place where I want to live. You have a premier school system. I want to move here. My business wants to go here because all these parents are moving there. I want us to shine that beacon. I want your property values, my property values, to go up with the school system's performance, because yes, they are tied. And I want our town's quality of life and our town's status and prestige with the aspiration that we have in our motto, where innovation lives, to live out that promise. And we can do that through our education. And last, my platform: accountability, best practices in education, and competitive excellence. That's it. Thank you.